The Wings Over New Zealand show is brought to you in association with the Wings Over New Zealand Aviation Forum, New Zealand's #1 aviation discussion forum online. There you'll find discussion on all aspects of New Zealand aviation, from history to current affairs, and thousands of photos covering the Royal New Zealand Air Force, airlines, general aviation, warbird restorations, airshow news, sport aviation, home building, gliding, aviation media, and much, much more. You'll be in good company with other aviation enthusiasts, including pilots, engineers, warbird owners and restorers, historians and authors, modelers, aviation photographers, and many others. Sign up to the Wings Over New Zealand community now. It's free and easy. Just Google Wings Over New Zealand and you'll find the forum.
Welcome to the Wings Over New Zealand show with Dave Homewood.
Hi, welcome to the Wings Over New Zealand show. I'm your host, Dave Homewood. On the 30th of October in 2016, we held a forum meet down at Wigram at the Air Force Museum of New Zealand. And we had a number of guest speakers, some of who presented with a lot of photographs. And so this is an audio podcast, but we're putting up the photographs to go along with the audio podcast via YouTube. So this is a bit of experimental work here for the Wings Over New Zealand show. We've not done this before. So you'll get to see the photos that Brodie, our speaker coming up, talks about. Now, Ross is a young pilot. He was 16 years old at the time of the talk, and he's now 17 at the time of this release of this recording. He's got an amazing history behind him of ancestry of pilots, and he just gave an amazing talk, and I hope you're going to enjoy it. It's really, really worth having a listen to. So here I am introducing Ross.
We've got Ross Brodie here, who's recently gone solo himself. How many times was it in the first day?
16.
16 times, yeah, on his 16th birthday. So welcome, Ross.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is really the start of my story. I'm actually a 4th generation aviator in my family, and that picture there, that's of my great-grandfather and namesake, and that picture was taken probably just a few hundred metres out that way on 12th September 1917. He went solo in the Quadron, operated of course by Canterbury Aviation Company. And 3 days later he got his ticket and went off with less than 10 hours and was sent over to the UK to do his military training, and thankfully he didn't get sent to France. He actually got sent to Egypt, and so he served there until 1919 with the RFC. And this is just a picture of him. He is the second from the left, and he was part of the first group to go through to get their tickets with the Canterbury Aviation Company. And so you'll see some of you may be able to pick out some other familiar faces in there. Of course, Bert Mercer of the West Coast flying. He's in there as well. So. 2nd generation, so I couldn't actually find a picture of my, grandfather and grandmother with aviation, but Struan, both my grandmother and grandfather flew. Struan Brodie, he learnt to fly in the 1950s with the South Canterbury Aero Club, and loved it so much he convinced his wife Anne to go and do it. And she also was one of the founding members of the Airwomen's Association in New Zealand. And they, of course, led on the 3rd generation. The young fella over there, he has a bit more hair in this picture. You might not be able to recognise him.
You mightn't keep it very long.
And in the late 70s, he started his flying career, going through his PPL with 2 quite well-known instructors. Jack Malhop and Tom Middleton, and so he says that he's very privileged to have flown, learnt with those 2 instructors. And then a little over 16 years ago, I came along, and and there was there was no time wasted in the brainwashing. So at that stage, I'm not even quite an hour old, and I was left alone with Dad for a few minutes, and the de Havilland book is already out. So really no hope for me from literally day one, with the aviation. So as long as I can remember, flying is something that I've wanted to do. And so in this picture here, I'm 2, and this was taken at a Tiger Moth Club event that we hosted at our airfield at Rangitata Island. And one morning of the event, Mum was busy in the kitchen getting some catering sorted, and she thought I was, being a good boy, staying in the cot. But she was mistaken. There were some aeroplanes outside to look at. And I actually somehow managed to climb over the railings of the cot, walk out to the airfield, and when I was found, I was sitting beside the runway and I was pointing at a tiger moth flying overhead. And
Sad.
Yeah, sad. Yeah. Growing up at the airfield, it was very, very privileged to be able to do that. In an environment with lots of flying going on. Doing lots of flying with Dad, and other people would come in with different aeroplanes and get to go for rides with them. Did some interesting things. So I think I might have been 5 when that picture was taken, just flying with Dad in the little Rans microlight we use for training. And did my first flying lesson, my first proper flying lesson, when I was 9, and I think that picture was taken just a wee bit after one of my early flying lessons. And you can almost a little bit see there is the cushions. I think when I first started I had 5 cushions, I think 3 behind me and 2 underneath, to be able to see and reach all of the controls. So with the flying, I had many good mentors to help me through with that along the way as well. Of course, one being Dad, who I started learning to fly with in microlights. This here is a good friend, Chuck Berry, who's actually more famous for a lot of the stuff he does in the air without wings, with skydiving and base jumping, this sort of thing. About a little over 10 years ago, he learnt to fly with Dad. And of course, with all the crazy stuff he did in the air out of aeroplanes, he had to go and do it in aeroplanes. And so I went through, got aerobatics rated, and when I was 7, he took me for my first aerobatics ride, which started something else for me, which I'll talk about a bit later on. Jerry Chisholm was another good mentor of mine. Jerry and his wife Jan, they're based out of Bridgepart at Hastings, and they own DH60, the Gypsy Moth, and the they operate a Tiger Moth. And the DH60 was actually the one which many of you probably already know was in the recent film Gene. And so Jerry, very experienced. I think he's got over 40,000 hours in lots of different things. And so I think the first time I flew with Jerry, I might have been 6, and he took me out in the a Piper Cub and showed me riverbed landings. Something a wee bit different. Ryan Southam is another one. He sent me solo in the Tiger Moth earlier on this year. I've been doing a bit of flying with him in the GA side of things. Very experienced Tiger Moth instructor. He's now based at Blenheim, and he's just started flying the Yak 3, which is very, very good. Yeah. That picture is that Andrew Love, another one of my instructors. He really got me on the path of really getting into aerobatics, and taught me a lot about that. And this picture is it was actually quite cool. A few months ago, he needed to do a photo shoot, and so that's me in the aircraft furthest from the camera, and Andy there, and I think that was kind of special to, after flying with Andy, and I think he's known me for a very long time, to go up and be able to fly in two aeroplanes together like that was quite special. And then last but not least is a very good friend of mine, Bevan Jews, who he's based at Masterton. He owns a Chipmunk, which he owned at the age of 19. So and he worked for us for a short time at Rangitata Island, and it was very good being able to, because of course with the aviation, is growing up I was always around people that were a lot older than me, and so it was quite good with Bevan coming along to be able to have someone a lot closer to my age to look up to. And my friendship with Bevan took me to quite a special event for me, which was going up to Marston for a vintage aviator flying weekend, which they had, and just went up to help out and get to be around the aeroplanes. And one day they were cleaning the FE2s, and I'll just actually flick to the next one, so you can see it's quite large, and no one was game, none of the pilots, none of the engineers were game to go up and clean them, the top wing, and so they volunteered the 13-year-old to go and do it. And so I climbed up there, and it was it must have nearly been circuit height from way up there, and got through, cleaned the top wing, and after that the chief pilot for the vintage aviator, Gene DeMarco, came up, and they were looking for gunners for the photo shoot, and he said, "Oh, you'll do." So that's me in the front of the FE2 furthest from camera. And so that was a very special, very special day, and very fortunate to have that opportunity. Yes, it is. Yes. So another big part of that was the pilot I was flying with is Keith Skilling, who of course is name probably rings a bell with most of you. Of course, very experienced pilot, flown many different things, probably most famous for he flies the Corsair at all the air shows, and so that was very special to be able to not just go flying in such a special aeroplane, but with such an experienced pilot. Also helping out over the weekend, a few days later got to go on the BE2 as well for another photo shoot that they had, and that was another very quite cool, because I'm quite a de Havilland fanatic, and that's about the earliest you can really go with flying de Havilland designs. Is a very early design from Geoffrey de Havilland, of course, with the BE2. And another, of course, with all the flying going on and having to wait until I was 16 to be able to do any of it myself, I got into photography, air-to-air photography. It was another hobby of mine. So I've just got a few pictures here. So it's something I got into, mostly actually for promotional pictures ourselves with the flight training. As went up a few times and really enjoyed it, and started looking for other aircraft to take pictures of. And so that's actually just a local aircraft who wanted some pictures, so we got that. Those are two of our training aircraft which we use. So these are both microlight category aircraft. Both Rans S6, one's tail dragger, one's trike. It's funny the way microlights have come about since the 1980s when they first came around. Is these are just the same as your regular GA aircraft, just a lot lighter. That is a true microlight. That's IPA Quicksilver. Most of you would probably call it a death trap. which that's always fun to fly from time to time when you're feeling brave. And of course that's actually Bevan Dews, that's his chipmunk when he had it based at our airfield for a while. I took that picture. And that's a more recent one I did. And anyone that's local, if you're ever in Ashburton, go into the Braided Rivers cafe, what are they, restaurant and bar. And the reason I actually took this picture is they wanted a picture of the tiger moth in front of Mount Hutt, and but the lighting wasn't very good to have the angle that we had on Mount Hutt and the lighting on the aeroplane. So what I actually did is took a nice picture of the nice lighting on the aeroplane, then took a picture of Mount Hutt, and they're stuck together. You don't notice when you look at it. And so that's actually, it's a big banner in the restaurant. In the back of the bar there. They have that. The Solo Day. You'll probably recognise a lot of these photos, John. I think that one might actually be one of your ones.
I think that you did that to me, I think.
Yeah. So it was not quite the weather we'd hoped for initially. So I think I got out of bed at a bit before 6 and got the aeroplanes ready as best I could because it was raining outside, so we couldn't actually get them out of the hangar. And we're waiting, and eventually the cloud base lifted, and we were able to do my very first solo in the RANS S6 that we used for training, JHZ, and that was quite special because it was also the aeroplane I did my very first flight in with Dad when I was I think a little over 1. So went through another RANS, a wee bit different, has a shorter wing and a bigger engine. There was a big break between those two because just after I soloed the first one, the cloud base came in again and had to wait for a bit over an hour, and then luckily it lifted just enough again to go up in that. A tail dragger RANS, that's an interesting one. The Zenith 701 is STOL aeroplane. Some might say the reason it gets off the ground so quick is because the earth repels it from it being so ugly. The Bantam, that was an interesting one, flying the Bantam, because I'd never flown it before because it is two-place, but it has a very low gross weight, and so we worked out that if me and Dad were to go flying in it, we would actually only be able to have 5 litres of fuel on board. And so he said, it's not that hard, it's just an aeroplane, go and fly it. So went up and did that, and was climbing out and looked down and, that's annoying. The airspeed indicator had packed a SAD, and it did read, but just after takeoff it went straight round to 70 knots, and I shook my head and went, Bantams don't do 70 knots. So got round and landed, and I still don't actually know how fast they go. I flew it a few other times after that, just to ferry it to another airfield for it to be pulled apart, and still don't know how fast they go because since it was just going to be ferried, we never changed it. CFM Shadow, it's a little English microlight. There's actually one of the air-to-air pictures I showed earlier was of that machine. It's very interesting. The bloke that designed it was very guess you could say vertically challenged, and so the front seat isn't too bad, but you've got to be not only short but a gymnast to be able to get into the back seat, and so that was actually also one which I hadn't flown previously just purely because of that. No instructor. The weight was fine. It was just the fact that no one was actually flexible enough to get into the back. A nice wee aeroplane, an Italian Pioneer 200, operated by a group at Ashburton. the same group operated a Jabiru, which I was also able to hire and do some training in. So that was good. The group, I was flying with Les Vincent. Some of you may know he's a very good instructor. Very, very good to fly with. So I wanted to say I wasn't able to do my very first solo on the Tiger Moth because of the, I didn't want to get the poor old instructor out of bed too early. And so that was number 9th on the day. I made it my first solo on a certified aircraft. Very, very privileged to be able to fly that aeroplane. It's very, very special aircraft. This photo here is actually, it's not a very good one, but I just thought that was quite special. I hadn't realised until I'd landed that that's my grandfather Struan there, just standing behind the cockpit, and that's 3 generations of Tiger Moth pilots. My grandfather Struan, he learned on Tiger Moths in the 50s when he was learning, and then of course Dad owning the Tiger Moth that I was flying here, and then me going solo on it. So that was quite a special occasion. Just some more aircraft. That's a Technam Sierra. That's Microlight 2, believe it or not. It's all metal, same construction methods as your standard Cessnas, Pipers. In fact, it's even more complex. It's got a very nice constant speed prop on it. Quite a nice wee aeroplane. My granddad Struan, he actually still owns an Aerotor. He hasn't flown in years, but he still owns this Aerotor, which I do a bit of aerobatics in from time to time. And so that was number 11 that I flew. Beagle Airedale. Some of you may recognise it, some may not. It's an interesting aircraft. It was the English answer to the Cessna 172 and sort of 182. It's fabric covered wings and fuselage with a metal tail, and it's got a 180 horsepower Lycoming 0360 with a constant speed prop, and very quirky, very English. It's actually looks like a 172, but Beagle it's actually made by the same people as Oster, and so it's actually, you have a look around the undercarriage, which looks quite strange. The reason it's like that is actually meant to be Oster undercarriage, but it's been turned around and moved back a bit further to make it into a trike. A little Cessna 150, and Rans S7, another Rans, just this one's tandem instead of side by side, and it's a wee bit heavier with a bigger engine. The wee Turbulent, it's actually one of my favourite aeroplanes. Very, very nice little machine, powered by the V-dub, of course. So actually, I think that was the only aeroplane on the day I did more than one circuit in, because it was the second last one to do, and I was lined up on finals for for landing the first time, and I went, it's too much fun, and so I went round again and flew around a few times, and then came in and landed, and then last but not least, the Death Trap, the old Quicksilver. So just a quick circuit around the patch just to finish off for the day, and that's me at the end of the day. We kept a sort of like a run, I guess you could say, a running score during the day of all of the aircraft I flew in. So I slept well that night. I was very very privileged, very lucky to get the opportunity to be able to have the access to fly all of those aircraft for the day. It was quite special. So it was later recognised by Flying New Zealand, or NZAC, as a national record for the most aircraft flown on 16th birthday. It's something that's been done before overseas, and it's widely recognised as a world record, but because FAI require you to have the official observers and all of this sort of carry on, we didn't bother with any of that because it's just added pressure, and I wasn't really looking to do any of the record stuff for a start anyway. And so that was it was quite good to actually get it officially recognised though. It was very good with that. And on this night, it was someone said, you'll be looking to protect that record, and I actually said, no, with the way aviation is at the moment, with a lack of young people coming through, I said, it's actually, if someone was interested, I'd be happy to help them, be able to go through and do something similar, if not better in the future. It was very, very good experience doing all of that. Flying the Tiger, I haven't done a lot in it, but it's very, very special. 1942, our one. It served, built in 1942, served at Harewood for the most of Second World War. Did a little bit here and a little bit at Ashburton from time to time, but mostly at Harewood. After the war, it was mothballed, went into storage, and then in the 50s, when they started the training program again at Taieri, it was came out again, painted silver, and started active service again at Taieri through the 50s, training pilots, and I think 1956, I think it was discharged, and it went into private ownership up in Masterton for many years, with gliding clubs and a few private owners. Then it came down here in the 90s, and some may remember the Barnstormers 115, or I don't think 115 was invented back then, but the adventure rides operation with Tiger Moth and a Stearman. Well, this was actually the Tiger Moth, which they operated here for a number of years, and then it went back up to Tauranga. Had a refurbishment, and in 2007 we came by it, and so it's very, very cool, to be flying a piece of history like that.
Is it a New Zealand built one?
Yes, it is. Yep, built at Rangitata. Yep.
Must have been a fair few interesting pilots that have been trained in that one over the years.
I'd say so. It's actually it's quite low hour for an Air Force Tiger, and so we're not sure why, because it hasn't had any major accidents. In the war, it had 2 heavy landings, but it's no serious accidents, and so we're not actually sure why it did so little hours, whether it was maybe the CO's favourite or something, and so he kept it at the back, didn't want anyone else flying it. We don't actually know.
Have you actually got the Air Force records from a service?
Do we?
Yeah, some of it when it was through, it had a heavy and the only night just was under 1,000 hours, both through the 40s at Harewood and down at Taieri. So, and I've met one old fellow at a marker last show who was an instructor, and he managed to score the ride back. He was from Wellington, and they needed to go back to maintenance, so he managed to score that ride. Got lost on the way and found some fuel and eventually got there, but he's the only pilot that I've actually met who flew in it. So over that 900 and something hours, there must be logbook. So if anybody ever runs across anybody, NZ1443 would be delighted to meet them or get copies of that history. Would be brilliant.
Yeah. So okay, yeah, aerobatics is that's something, another big passion of mine within aviation. As of course I talked earlier with, I did my first ride doing aerobatics when I was 7 with a good friend, Chuck Berry, and it was I'd done a little bit over the years with instructors, but it was really about November last year. My instructor Andrew Love insisted that I should, get a bit of practice in and enter in this competition. Flying New Zealand regionals held at Ashburton, and we'll give it a go, and really enjoyed it. So I didn't get anywhere with that competition, but it was, it got me hooked, and it's one of my favourite things to do is seeing the world from upside down, and in March I kept practicing, and entered the New Zealand Aerobatic Club there national comps at Masterton, and I actually went through in the primary category. I competed and managed to win it somehow, and also got the most improved trophy, which is actually what I'm holding there, in Grandad's Air Tour, and that was a very good experience to be able to go through to that and be able to compete. Another one is gliding, which I actually haven't done for a long time. So I talked about this first solo before. It actually wasn't my very first solo. My very first solo was actually in a glider when I was 14 at Omarama, and that was in the Grob Twin Astaire, which is there on screen, with a camp for the Youth Glide group, which is a very, very good group, trying to get younger people into aviation through gliding, and so I went through and did that camp, and after just 8 flights I managed to kick out the instructor, and went up on my own in the glider, and we actually just I haven't flown a glider since then, which was December 2014, and we've just bought one. It's an old Schleicher K7, which was actually operated by I think the Wigram Gliding Club it was called, not Canterbury, but the Wigram one, and so that was actually based here, I think from the 70s onwards. 60s, was it? Yeah, from the 60s, from you, and we actually got it from Matamata, and so it was down here for a long time. It was on a lot of the early Air Training Corps gliding camps that they would have, I think at Timaru. And so that was, we first got the glider and then found out the history and thought, oh well, that's actually quite cool to be able to have that local link with the history of that glider. This is one of my more recent adventures, is Giovanni Nistrini, the Technam agent, when he was actually delivering RGB, the Technam, for the Canterbury Recreational Aircraft Club, is he had his Technam P2008 demonstrator. He flew that down, and he said, "Oh, I'm going over to Australia for a couple of weeks. So not much point in it sitting in the hangar up at Ardmore. Would you be able to look after it?" And so I was entrusted with an aeroplane for I think 4 weeks in the end. And so this is also microlight category. It's a very nice Italian aircraft. It's all carbon fibre fuselage and aluminium wings, with 100 horsepower Rotax. That's the instrument panel, and so I've never flown anything quite like it before. It's the reason I was able to take that picture is because it also has autopilot, and it was it was not far off. Almost felt like you're in an airline or something, sitting in that. So that was another very interesting registering work experience. I think in the end I did a bit over 20 hours in it, just doing things like demo rides and a couple of type ratings and that. So yeah, that was quite a lot of fun. Now the future for me is I have big dreams. I'd like to compete in the Red Bull Air Race, and so that's sort of following on with my passion for the aerobatics, and so in the next few years, hopefully I'll be going through the stages in the competition, getting experience, with competition aerobatics, and also hopefully some stuff at air shows with the aerobatics. So I've just got to work through and do that, and so in the next few years having to be hopefully looking for some sponsorship for going through and achieving that goal.
Doesn't Steve Hinton need some competition?
Yeah.
Reno?
Yeah, maybe. That's a bit boring though, You're only turning one way. It's just...
At 500 miles, isn't it?
At 500,
Americans like doing that.
Yeah, so, that's hopefully where I'm going to be heading in the future, with a bit of luck. I'll thank you all very much. That's the end of my presentation. Is there any questions? Yes.
You said you soloed in the glider at 14.
Yes.
What's the legal age for soloing a glider, or is there one?
It's a real grey... There's actually a lot of stuff in gliding. There's a lot of grey areas. And I had a feeling it was 12, and I asked different instructors. Some said 14, some said 12, some said I don't even think there is one. And which seems silly because for potential to go wrong, in a powered aeroplane, if you're a wee bit low on approach, it's, we'll just go around. In a glider, you don't have much option. You're going to hit that fence. And so it's... but I have actually heard one recently where there was a guy and his daughter soloed a glider at, I think, 12. And Gliding New Zealand CAA had no problem with it. It was actually SIFs came in, and they said, it's abandonment, which is ridiculous. But no, seriously, they came in and they after she'd soloed and said, look, you can't do that. It's abandonment. It's like, I don't think she would be there if she wasn't capable or wanted to, but Anything else?
Have you got any desire to get into the warbird side as well, or the classic?
Yeah, I would like to in the future. It's
You've got a Tiger Moth.
Yeah. So I'd actually, with the air show stuff, of course, because we've got some very good pilots in New Zealand already performing aerobatics at air shows. I'd actually like to be able to fly the Tiger Moth at the air show for a start, rather than doing the aerobatics. But it's definitely something else I'd like to do. And following along with Bevan as well, with that's what he's well on track to doing. Is getting into some of the warbird things later on. Yeah.
So there must have been quite a bit of preparation for your 16 different types. I mean, tailgag and those were all...
Yeah.
Because Charlie, the Beagle, was it still owned by Charlie then? Or?
No, not. When did we, or our friend Paul, got the Beagle in December, the December before that solo. So we'd only, because we were sort of operating it with them, and so we'd only just got it. And so actually, I hadn't done a huge amount of proper time in it before I went solo on it. Most of it was with Dad, and of course he's not a GA instructor, so I couldn't log it. But yeah.
There was the old microlight instructor and engineer, one responsible for the pilot and the aeroplanes, who did all that beforehand. So.
Yeah. So no, I was had a good team of people helping me there as well, as
So what are your hours now? What are you up to?
I've got my logbook just over there. I think I've got about a little over 220 hours total time, and
a lot more than that. That's not logged.
Yeah, a wee bit more. Yeah, that's of just dual though. Everything that I've done, pilot and commanders in there. So I think I've done 110 of that, maybe a little more, as pilot and command, which is it's a wee bit in nearly 11 months.
Nearly 60 hours of that's instructing research.
Yeah. So been busy. Yeah.
Not much getting done around the farm, Ross.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ross.
Thank you, Ross.
That was a great talk, and I don't think I've ever invited anyone as young as you to come and speak, because most 16-year-olds wouldn't be able to get up and do that. And congratulations on doing that.
Thank you.
And a really good presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
That was the Wings Over New Zealand show with Dave Homewood.